Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. Obviously, Warzone right now is sort of in a testing phase, I would say, if you will, for Warzone 2. Clearly, Raven is trying to experiment with certain things to see how it basically sits with the community, whether we like it or not, so they can make a decision moving forward for what's going to be implemented in Warzone 2 whenever that ends up dropping. And actually, earlier on this week, a very interesting conversation surfaced on Twitter that essentially ended in Raven somewhat hinting at the fact that we could be seeing a major change to slide canceling in that gameplay mechanic if the community were to say, hey, maybe we should see a change to slide canceling and that mechanic. So as we break everything down today, if you enjoy the video at any point, let me know by dropping a like on it, would be seriously appreciated. And if you're new here, or if you have not already subscribed, each and every single day, I got you covered with everything going on in COD, news, updates, loadouts, tips. You're gonna find it all right here. So feel free to subscribe with those notifications turned on. That way you can always stay up to date. So first things first, I do want to make it very clear that absolutely nothing is set in stone. We could see changes to slide canceling in the future. We also very well could not. At the end of the day, there was no solidified outcome of this conversation. It was just a conversation, but it does pose some very interesting questions in my opinion. Honestly, it's kind of funny because this all started off as a joke over on Twitter with Doug from Modern Warzone. I'm sure most of you guys know who he is. And then also Ted Timmons, who is the creative director for Raven. We've talked about Ted a lot. He's always in the calls that I'm able to sit on with Raven. So both familiar names here on the channel. And this initially started with Doug saying he wanted to get one of like the Raven shirts or like towels that they give out for special events. And Ted ended up responding to one of Doug's tweets saying, if the slide canceling vote comes back as a win for its removal, and I can finally have an excuse to remove this exploitable accessibility ceiling, you can have mine, referencing the towel that he has. Now, this is actually referencing a poll that Modern Warzone was doing on his Twitter, asking, do you want to see slide canceling in Modern Warfare 2 in Warzone 2, yes or no? And we'll get to that later on in the video because obviously that's a crucial part of this. But also, just to clarify, that poll is not like an official one from Raven. It's just Doug doing it on his Twitter. So it's not like by any means the official way to determine whether or not something's going to happen or it's not going to happen. Anyway, Ted also followed that tweet up by saying, I've been looking for a good excuse to fix slide canceling for almost a year now. My unused towel can be the sacrifice for the greater good of controllers everywhere. So clearly, Ted is interested in adjusting slide canceling, and he apparently has been for quite some time, but there is more to this conversation to be had. He also followed those tweets up by saying, in response to Doug, in all seriousness, you've seen how much we listen to the community, so if the community wants slide canceling gone from Warzone, it would be something that they discuss with the pros and the cons internally, and then they could potentially, keyword potentially, make a change for a future update. He also ended up responding to Burger, shout out Carnage Burger, saying, with the momentum and the positivity that we have right now, we don't want to disrupt that, which is why no changes have been made or are currently in the works. There is no change to slide canceling being worked on right now. Movement is a core pillar for us with Warzone, and we treat it with great care and attention. So essentially, what all these tweets are saying, what Ted is saying in all these responses is that if the community is in favor of seeing something like slide canceling adjusted in some way, shape, or form, then they would think about doing it. They would have conversations saying, you know, would this be for the greater good of the game? How could we balance this out while not completely destroying the movement meta in games? So before anyone gets up in arms, you know, oh, they're gonna kill the movement meta, it is not even a thing that is in discussions internally yet because they don't know how the community feels. That said, they can base some of what the community feels off of Modern Warzone's poll, do you want slide canceling to be in MW2 in Warzone 2? When I ended up screenshotting this, there were about 5 hours left on the poll. There were almost 32,000 votes though, so I don't see the results changing all that much from where they were when I screenshotted it compared to when it ends 5 hours later. But almost 60% of players wanted to see slide canceling in MW2 and Warzone 2, and about 40% of players did not want to see it. And that is where we get into the main conversation for today. We've obviously set the table, if you will. We have this information from Ted Timmons from Raven saying, you know, if it's something the community wants, we would think about altering that. How could you potentially alter slide canceling without ruining a movement meta that's been in place for 2 years at this point? Honestly, I feel like there are several ways to do this. Now, for what it's worth, The issue that devs have with slide canceling and the issue that players have with slide canceling in some cases is that, one, it is an accessibility skill gap. Now, that is something that is entirely different from a general game skill gap. I think there should be skill gaps in game. I think players who want to put in the time and the effort to master something should be rewarded with, being able to outgun players who have not put in that time and work. I feel like that is necessary for competitiveness in a game. And being a very competitive person, I love skill gaps because it does reward dedication. On the other hand, accessibility skill gaps are not necessarily something that is that fun, because players who necessarily can't slide cancel, who can't take advantage of that, don't really stand a chance in the first place, because it is something that is not available to them. Obviously, they've done really well in Warzone with accessibility options and making so that all types of players can play the game in some way, shape, or form. But slide canceling with that specific mechanic is not something that they can just necessarily make available to players that are less accessible, that have to use some of these accessibility options to make the game playable. And that I completely understand, and I think that's a fair argument, because that is something that is abused. Now, the thing with slide canceling that is quote unquote abused isn't necessarily the sliding movement. Sliding in general is not that broken. There is a skill gap to mastering it and being able to use it in certain situations. The broken part of slide canceling is the fact that it is constantly resetting your tack sprint, which is not an intended feature. Every time you slide cancel, your tack sprint returns, and you can use that to move incredibly quickly. So that is why you see players slide canceling 24/7. That's why controllers are being destroyed and shift buttons are being destroyed, and there is that actual accessibility skill gap. So how do you maintain slide canceling as an effective strategy in game, but not one that is broken and giving an advantage to players who are fully accessible? Well, I think you do that by fixing the issue with slide canceling. You make it so that it doesn't reset tack sprint, which then in turn would give benefits to maybe buffing some perks like double time, or even adding in a new perk that makes it so that you could do that if you wanted to, but you'd have to burn a perk attachment on that. Or double time, obviously with increasing the duration of tack sprint, would suddenly become a lot more useful. If slide canceling were to not constantly reset tack sprinting in and of itself would be more of a focus in game for general maneuverability across the map, and double time then probably skyrockets in general usage and popularity. And personally, I like the idea of that because it brings more competition to that perk 1 category in general. I, for one, already love using double time, but admittedly, I slide cancel so much that I don't get a full benefit of using it all the time necessarily, because I'm negating the tack sprint duration increase because I'm just slide canceling again and again and again. At the same time, I feel like you should be able to constantly reset that slide and sprint, slide, sprint, slide, sprint, slide, not necessarily tack sprint, slide, just because that maneuverability and that movement meta that we have is a skill gap that I believe should be in the game, but the broken aspects of slide canceling don't necessarily have to be if you can find a way to offer rewards for just using basic features in the game, like for instance, double time. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on this down in the comments below, though. Obviously, we now have Raven saying, potentially we could see some changes to this if the community wants to see it. The comments on this video, a great space to have that sort of debate. Should slide canceling stay in the game as it is right now? Should it be balanced in a way that's more friendly to everyone? Let me know what you think. That said, that is going to wrap things up for today. If you enjoyed the video, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new here, or if you have not already subscribed, every single day I got you covered with all things going on in COD. So feel free to subscribe with those notifications turned on. That way you can always guarantee you are up to date. And as always, if you want to check out any of my partners, be sure to use code WhosImmortal for a discount on all Scuff, G Fuel, Gamer Advantage, and Control Freak products, and the links for all those can be found down in the description below. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.